kind of a little pendant that I put together. I had this seashell piece, and then I had this mermaid piece, and I had this bail. They call it a bail, this little part at the top. And I've had this pendant for a while. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put together a little pile of beads, and then I'm gonna string those beads into a necklace. I have my thread here. I'm gonna use this, I already had this, so I'm just gonna use what I've got. Natural silk. Silk is supposed to be real strong. It's good for beading. Some people use it to do pearl knotting. That's where you put the pearls on and then you tie a little knot in between each pearl. Because you know what, if you don't do that, if you just string pearls on a string and you don't tie knots in between, they actually like kind of rub together and pinch your skin. It's really weird. I mean, I don't know if that's why people do knots in between them, but like one time I was like, I don't need to put knots in between pearls, and then I just strung them on a string and I was wearing it like a bracelet, and it kept pinching my skin. It hurt. And I was like, I wonder if that's why they put knots in between, so they don't like rub together and pinch you or whatever. So anyway, I even have these little, these are pearl knotting tweezers, but they're real useful for other things too, because they got this real fine point on them. Since this one has a pendant on it, I'm probably going to want to put a clasp on it. So we need to finish the end in a certain way. And meanwhile, here is the bracelet I was working on last time. I think I was working on this one last time I did a Maker Monday. This is my little pirate bracelet with little fish and cannonballs and piratey skulls. Let's see. I'm looking through all of my beads here, trying to pick out some stuff. You'll see when I'm done here, I'm making a little pile of beads here. And I'm not going to try to do any sort of pattern with them. I'm just going to mix them all up and string them randomly. I like doing stuff like that. I think there's kind of a beauty that emerges from chaos. And a lot of the jewelry that I make is not perfectly balanced. You know, some people might do a pendant and then say, okay, here's 2 blue beads, and here's 2 green beads, and here's white beads, and then, you know, then they'll do a little pattern going up so it all looks samey. But, you know, if you've ever looked at the ocean or the ocean waves crashing on the beach, you know, there's no pattern to that. It's just this beautiful kind of constantly changing chaos. And that's what I want in my necklace that I'm making. So I'm not going to try to pick out each bead as I go along. What I'm going to do is just make a collection of beads that look pretty together, see, and then string them up. It's kind of like a kaleidoscope. You ever look through a kaleidoscope? I love kaleidoscopes. I'm probably going to need more than that. Yeah, but we'll see how far we get. Okay. So I'm going to start by tying a knot in this end. I'm going to make it a big fat knot so that it won't come through this hole right here. See that little hole right there? Maybe I should move over here. This hole right here. We don't want it to be smaller than that hole, because then the whole thing would fall apart. All right, so now that little fat knot is going to sit right in there. Little tiny bit. And we're just going to put it right in there on that knot to kind of just help hold it in place. It's not required, but I like to put a little drop of glue in there. And then I'm gonna clamp it shut. Like that. And that's your little knot cover there. Oh, I still was looking for a set of jewelry tools to share with my girls. Any recommendations? Oh, well, there's so many different tools. It depends on what you're making. I mean, I have these, they're called rosary pliers, or jeweler's pliers, or round nose pliers. But they're round nose pliers with a cutter in the center, so you don't have to keep switching between tools, because you can get round tip pliers or you can get cutters. But, you know, if you have one in the same tool, then you don't have to keep switching all the time. That's great if you're going to do any kind of, you know, opening and closing jump rings, doing chainmail, doing the rosary style wire work stuff that I did before. Do you remember the purple one that I made a few weeks back? I mean, if you're just gonna do beading like I'm doing right now, you probably don't need any special tools at all, except for, you know, thread and beads. But it depends on what you're making. You know, I was saying earlier that if you're doing pearl knotting, that you need these special tweezers. You know, if you're doing crimping, this is a crimping tool, but I don't know, generally, I think if you go to craft stores, at least here in the US, I don't know about the UK, but here, if you go to get jewelry tools, I mean, that's usually what you'll get is round tip pliers, a cutter, possibly pliers with teeth, but I don't know what you would use those for jewelry. I don't even know if I have any in here. But you know what I'm talking about, like regular pliers, like you would see in a toolbox that a, you know, mechanic or handyman or something would have, where it has little teeth in here. You know, some people have those, but I don't use those for jewelry because I don't want the teeth to chew things up. And I will say, this pair of pliers right here is 20 years old, and it was made in Germany. It wasn't cheap. You can get cheap jewelry tools, you know, $5 or $6 or whatever, but I think I paid at the time, like 20 years ago, I think I paid like 25 or 30 bucks for these, maybe more. But, you know, they've lasted forever, so, or, you know, so far anyway. But again, it just depends on what it is you plan to do with them. You know, I have a little mini anvil. That's something else you can use for making jewelry. And I have a hammer, chasing hammer, for making jewelry, for hammering on the anvil. I use that for making certain types of jewelry. I have a ring mandrel, which is for, you can use it for sizing rings to see what size your ring is. You know, like, you know, you go to the jewelry store and they could put this on here and say, oh, that's a 7.5. Well, looks like 7.25, but yeah, probably about 7.5. And, but you can also use this, because this one is, you know, stainless steel or whatever. You can use this for shaping rings too. So like if your ring gets bent and you know, you can use this to kind of straighten it out. You can hammer on it. If you're making jewelry, if you're making a ring that you want to hammer. This is probably, I don't know because I've never made a spoon ring, but this is probably what people use to make spoon rings. Have you ever seen spoon rings? Spoon rings is when you cut off the bowl of the spoon, and you know, like the end of the spoon has something real pretty on the end. You know, decorative, old, if it's real silver, you know, you find it in an antique shop or whatever, and it has some little roses on the end or whatever. You can cut the bowl off and file the handle of the spoon, and then bend it around something like that and turn it into a ring. But I have the ring mandrels because of making wire rings. I found a box of rocks. If you've ever heard the phrase, dumb as a box of rocks, there you go. There's a box of rocks. I don't know what's dumb about that, but there you go. I just found a box full of jewelry. This must be stuff that I made back when I had a studio, but it hasn't been photographed and put on my website yet. There we go. I found a ring. Found a ring. Found a wire ring. That's what I was looking for. What else did I find? Looks like I found a mermaid's treasure chest. With, oh yeah, these. These are fairy coins. Those are cool. Back to the wire ring real quick. We were talking about ring mandrels. And these are 2 buttons. These are 2 vintage buttons. So there's a little star button, and it's nestled inside of this little cup-shaped sort of button here. This other button. And then I've used gold wire to make the band. But yeah, so I use a ring mandrel to make that. I actually have a couple of plastic ring mandrels because I used to teach this. Like I would teach people how to make them. So I had my, you know, expensive metal mandrel, and then I had these plastic mandrels for students to use. But that's how you can make sure, like if you want a ring that's a certain size, then you use the mandrel to size it as you're making it. Because you can't resize it after you're done. Now I'm kind of just trying to get this started. Now I'm just going to tie a little knot right here. I'm not necessarily going to tie a knot between all of the beads. But every once in a while when I'm making a beaded necklace, I like to tie a knot just in case it ever breaks, then all the beads don't fall off. Okay, we got the back end started, so now we're just gonna randomly start flinging on beads. Yeah, I like that. Okay. See, so it's kind of got this, like, it's got blue to it, like the ocean, but different shades of oceany blue. And then a little bit of green, a little bit of sparkle, like seaweed. Right? A little bit of mystery. Catching the light as it moves. All right, so let's take a look so far at what we have. And there we go. Not bad. I like it. Now I'm not sure how long I want to make this necklace, because you know, different people have different size necks, and different people have different preferences for where they want a necklace to fall. Some people might like, well, you know, choker is like right up here. And, you know, that's not a style that most people wear nowadays. I mean, sometimes, but not usually. That's more of like, you think of that like in Victorian times or something. Slightly lower down can be popular because, you know, if you're wearing a t-shirt you know, a scoop neck t-shirt or a blouse of some kind, kind of the modern thing. You know, you want a necklace that's going to be above the line of your blouse and not be lost. You know, if you wear a longer necklace and it gets lost under your t-shirt or under your blouse, you know, and then if it has a pendant on it like that, you know, if the chain, if this part is too long and you're wearing a shirt, you know, and this gets hidden by the collar of the shirt, that's not going to work. But, you know, if it's long enough, then it will hang down below the collar of the shirt, outside the shirt, you know, and you can put a pendant that hangs lower. And different people have different preferences, you know. Some people layer their necklaces, so they want to be able to wear more than one, so they might want to have one that's shorter, one that's longer. You know, some people like really long necklaces. They want it to hang really low and be like hitting them in the chest. Of course, this is kind of high-chested here. Let's make that more realistic. But you know, so like what length am I going to make it, right? Where is this pendant going to fall for people? A standard size is usually, well, depending on the build of the person, this is about 16 inches. Or right about here, it's like 18. You know, and then if you start getting real low like this, you're looking at like 24 or 30. You know, a 30-inch necklace can usually be pulled over the head. It's big enough that it can go over the head and the nose and everything comfortably without breaking, you know. But for this, I'm thinking more of a length that's like maybe 18, 16 to 20-ish. But I like to make them adjustable when I make jewelry. I like it to be adjustable because that way people of different sizes and builds can wear them, and that way people who want to wear them with different shirts with different collars and things can adjust them higher or lower. I don't want to put too much of an extension chain on there because then you've got more chain than necklace. And if you have it hooked on, you know, like way up here, you're going to have this chain dangling down behind your neck, you know, which, you know, is not that big of a deal. It can actually look pretty in its own right. But, I don't know. Let's see. Let's make this. Let's measure it on here. That would be 2 inches right there. Hey, Dark Arrow's got a question. It is a lengthy question. Let me read this question. Have you ever worked with the gemstone tiger eye? I have. The reason I ask is a past project was making a dream catcher and some of the stone holes were too small and I tried to use a little drill bit, but each time I tried to drill a tiny little bit bigger, the hole would break. If you ever worked with it and any suggestions or tools to use, what can you tell me to suggest? There's a thing called a bead reamer. I think it's R-E-A-M-E-R. I don't have one because I've never needed it, but it's a tool. It's like a little metal tool with a little tiny little like file on the end, and it's pointed. And the idea is that you take it and you know, spin it like this in beads to make the hole a little bigger. And if not that, then you know, either use a smaller thread, or, you know, what I've done is just ordered different beads. Tried to find beads that would fit. Usually you can get a bead seller to tell you what the diameter of a hole is that are drilled in the beads. I've noticed in some beads that they're drilled from both sides. They're not drilled straight through. So like they'll be drilled to the middle and then drilled from this side to the middle, and they're drilled with a slightly angled drill. So the hole is actually kind of hourglass shaped, very slightly, if that makes any sense. So you'll get the thread in just so far, and then you can't get the thread all the way through. And that's why people will use a bead reamer just to get in there and just get just enough space filed out of the center that they can get the thread through. But, you know, yeah, it's a gentle operation because you could end up cracking it or breaking it at that end. Oh, bead reamer, I believe you can get me through the night. Sorry. It's a pain in the neck, especially if you're ordering beads online because you don't have a chance to, like, you know, check the holes yourself. It's hard with beads, man, because there's so many beads that are like, you know, people will sell and say, hey, it's turquoise. Hey, it's tiger eye. Hey, it's, you know, something. And then it turns out it's just like composite resin or something. So yeah, that's one of those things you got to be careful about if you do want real gemstones, is get them from somebody you trust, get a trusted source, and also look at the price, because if it's cheap, if it's too good to be true, if the price is cheap, then you're probably not getting what you think you're getting. Because with things like turquoise, for instance, you know, real turquoise is not cheap. I mean, it's not going to be as expensive as diamond or ruby or something like that, but it's certainly not going to be $2 a strand or something like that. All right. So we've tied that knot. But now we need to finish this end so it looks like that end. So we need to put, this is going to get tricky. We need to put this knot cover on this end. But I've got to try to tie some knots with it like that. And if I screw this up, I have to restring the whole thing all over again. So what I'm going to do is do that off camera, just so that I can get my eyeballs close to it and not mess it up. And we can look at it all finished next week, but it's close to being finished. I just got to finish that end off. And attach the links to that end right there. And then it'll be all done. And that is going to be our mermaid necklace.